resonates in a similar way to the one that I had with all of you at Beta Phi and Sigma Chi. So definitely an important part of my life, and a big reason why I've made the decision to stay connected to Sigma Chi and to the U of A. Matt's got here a quote up on the screen from Teddy Roosevelt. I'm guessing most of you are familiar with it. This hangs on the wall in my office in downtown Seattle, and it just provides me with a daily reminder, a daily inspiration about life and why it makes sense for us to make the choice to be on the arena floor versus in the stands. I think it's a good analogy for a lot of the life I've been fortunate to lead, but in good times and bad, through attaboys and criticisms, I just think this quote really sums it up well about a choice. And I think Sigma Chi and Beta Phi really amplified this kind of thinking for me when I was there, and then would go into the world as we all have to figure out what path in life had next for us. Let's go on to some things about what's happened with me personally. I'll pull up a photo here of my better half and my daughter. I thought this was appropriate since I've got an Arizona shirt on. That is down at Machu Picchu. It's a few years old now. My daughter Annabelle is now 18. She, like some of you, I'm sure, has a senior year in high school that's been disrupted by COVID-19. She'll be graduating later this month by way of mail. Hopefully they'll have a ceremony in the fall. They're going to try to do that. But she's been at boarding school for 3 years in Connecticut. She asked us at dinner one night as a freshman at a high school in Seattle if she could go to boarding school. Drove the whole process, had a presentation, and she's a real independent go-getter. So very proud of her. She's our one and only. We had a hard time getting out of the first trimester. So she's a real blessing for us, and she's going to go to the University of St. Andrews in Scotland this fall, as I mentioned earlier, as we're waiting to get the call going. And that's my wife, Diana. We got married on September 11, 93, 8 years before that fateful day in New York, and people still ask us how we could pick such an awful date. And we remind them we didn't know what might happen in the world 8 years later. But it's a special day to us, and obviously one we can't easily forget. We met in Seattle in the spring of '92 before I would leave for London, England for my first job with Bank of America in their capital markets group, which was a fascinating experience. And she ran the ESPP program for Microsoft. So awesome, capable gal, blessed to be married to her. We had our 26th wedding anniversary this past September. So love the family. That's them. They say hello. And with regards to my parents, unfortunately, I've lost both of them. I lost my dad in 2011 after 20 years of challenges with heart health. And my mom passed away from cancer in January 18. So I know we've all had parents we've lost, family members we've lost, certainly big moments in our lives. That put a lot of perspective into place. Grateful for the role they played in the formation of my life. So what have I been doing professionally post my time at U of A? I have, as I said, I went to B of A London in the early 90s, worked in the capital markets group. That was the financial engineering and risk management department. It was on the old trading floor of Drexel Burnham. Michael Milken's shop. So that was a fascinating experience. I actually was forming a plan to go build a life in Europe, in finance and probably in media, because it's been such a big part of our family's background. But I met Diana before I left, and I came home, and we got married, and we started a life in Seattle. I went to work for Seattle First National Bank. They were a sub entity of Bank of America, and now they're called B of A in Seattle as well. Worked in a variety of different capacities for the bank, both commercial and consumer, for several years. And then through my experience with a lot of you guys, when we were in college together at U of A, I think you knew about our family's background in media and sports. My dad called me at the bank one day and said, I want you to come to the company. We're going to take on redeveloping the arena where the Sonics play. and I need someone to lead our corporate partnership effort and make sure we get all of our premium seating sold, because those are the two drivers of paying the debt service for the bonds we're going to float with the city of Seattle to get the building done. So that was my first, post high school, college foray into the family company, the Ackerley Group. We were a New York Stock Exchange traded company, diversified media and entertainment. I started there in that premium seating corporate partnership role, and then went to corporate as a VP for marketing and corporate development. And it was at that time when we made the transition from the American Stock Exchange to the New York Stock Exchange, which was a fascinating process. Certainly a more difficult one, I think, then than it is now, based on number of trailing quarters. You actually have to be profitable. Today, we all know we've got a bunch of companies listing on the exchanges that aren't profitable, but have access to capital nonetheless to grow their businesses, and that's good. My role there, again, was focused on digital marketing across all of our media groups, which was TV, radio, outdoor advertising, and then, of course, our sports and entertainment group, which had a pro indoor soccer team, the Supersonics. And then in '99, we actually launched a WNBA team in Seattle, the Seattle Storm, which was a really interesting experience. So I was in the corporate environment for several years. And then one day when I was 30 years old, there was a board meeting, and I got called into the board meeting. And this is applicable to that quote I love from Teddy Roosevelt about taking the risk and stepping in the arena. It was me on one side of the table and a bunch of directors on the other side. And I was asked to consider taking on the role of president of the parent company, which to me felt like quite an undertaking at any point in life, yet alone at 30 years of age. Talked it over with my wife and said, let's do it. And I did. And I embarked on several years that were I wasn't home much. That's when our daughter was born. And it was a busy period for our business. We actually made the decision at that time to sell our sports franchises. So I put a deal together with a guy named Howard Schultz, who started a coffee company in Seattle, and a group of Seattle investors called the Basketball Club of Seattle. So they bought the franchises from us. We had a pure play media company at that point, because Wall Street did not like our sports business. It was not a cash flow model business. It was an asset appreciation play, even though we put the games on a sports radio station that we ran in Seattle. But we had a really, really interesting 5-year action plan for the business, where we had been in all these traditional analog media businesses like TV, radio, and outdoor across the country. But we saw the growth of the internet. And we were right in the front end of kind of the bust of the bubble in '01 of the first iteration of the web. But we were believers that the eyeballs are going there, and we need to engage and develop our own platform strategy to bring the web into the Ackerley Group. Then shortly thereafter, we're a public company. We get an offer from Clear Channel Worldwide from San Antonio. We get a fairness opinion from an investment bank. And before we really have that opportunity to act on this plan to really move into the digital realm, we enter into an agreement to sell the rest of our company and its media assets to Clear Channel. So that was a frenetic, very busy, dynamic 3 years. And in parallel, I was busy, managing our relationship with the street as a public enterprise. So I was fortunate that I came out of that, and I was still married. Wife didn't change the locks on the door because we had a newborn at home and I wasn't around as much as I wanted to be. And I was able to help my parents figure out the next path with their life as they moved into retirement. And then I'm sitting there basically in my early 30s saying, where do we go from here as a family professionally? So we started an entity called Ackerley Partners. And it's a family office investment platform that my twin brother, Ted, who a bunch of you have met historically, who was at UCLA while we were all at U of A. It's a media-centric investment fund. We don't raise capital directly for our fund, but we have a syndicate of partners that we enter into transactions with to invest in predominantly media-related companies. We started more early stage. We've gone further downstream to more growth stage. And we've also diversified into real estate and healthcare. So it may be pharma, it may be a medical device, but always going to a place where we surround ourselves with people that are domain experts to help us with what we want to do, because we know we don't know everything, far from it, but we're going to leverage our network to build the key relationships that we need to develop a plan for a vertical of something that we want to engage with. So it's been a really interesting chapter, some peaks and valleys. You know, you move from an operating role with a large company into being more of a partner and investor role. It's a transition, and one I'm sure a number of you are familiar with. And it's still a family-centered enterprise. So that brings a whole other set of dynamics into the equation, but it's been really interesting. So along with that, in parallel, I found myself living what I call a portfolio life. I sit on 7 corporate boards, some public, some private. And these are, some of them are portfolio companies, some are just companies where I've been invited to assist a management team through a board structure with the continued development of their company, whether it's a bank or the Space Needle or a software company in Bellevue, Washington. So it's a diverse mix. Chair a lot of different committees. It's been fascinating. And that's been a nice kind of adjunct part of what I've been able to do through the platform strategy that we have for Ackerley Partners. And then today, in addition to some of those enterprises I mentioned, we made a decision to get involved with bringing the NHL to Seattle. We were really unhappy to see the Sonics leave when they left 7 years after we sold them to Howard's Group, who then sold them to a group from Oklahoma City. Not something we ever would have forecasted when we sold the team. And the good news here is we're with a group where we're going to redevelop the same platform that the Sonics called Home Key Arena. We're currently doing it now. It's coming out of the ground. Don't have a title sponsor yet, but to be a part of doing something civically that gives us a chance to reinvent a platform to bring the NHL to Seattle. And yes, one day the return of the NBA, that's a big part of our strategy. But the only person who should comment publicly on whether the NBA comes back to Seattle or not is the commissioner, Adam Silver. So we'll leave that to him when the time is right. But this, as I'll talk a bit more on later in my comments, this is really a founding kind of operating principle for us, where we can do business that also has really positive civic impact. Because being involved civically for us as a generation on the heels of our parents in Seattle has been a big part of what we do and how we try to make a difference. So let me continue here. Talking a little bit about civic engagement, as I just mentioned, philanthropy, and then connectedness to the U of A, which is hugely important to me. So I've got a quote here. Winston Churchill is someone that my father studied intensively. And so we too heard and learned a lot about Winston Churchill. And there's a great quote we used to have on our corporate office wall. You guys probably have heard it. And it's, we make a living out of what we earn. We make a life out of what we give. And we think about that in the way that we make a choice to share our time, talent, and treasure to help make the world a better place. And that's a big part of what drives what we're doing in business, in philanthropy, in civics. How can we do well by doing well by others? And that has been informed for me in large part by a corporate giving arm that we had in our operating company, a foundation that we started as a family that focuses on early childhood education and development. And then having the good fortune to get involved with a bunch of nonprofits, chairing nonprofit boards, as I'm sure many of you guys have done a lot of things with your lives in the community. Just having an impact with the gift that we have to be here, to be present, and to make a difference. And we are deeply committed to that in our lives. So civic and philanthropic engagements continue to be a big part of our life. And connectedness to U of A falls into that category. First of all, thanks to those of you who may have been involved in some committee process back in 2006, when I had the honor of being inducted into the Beta Phi Hall of Honor. The Eller College came calling and asked if I would be interested in joining the national board, which I did a number of years ago now, and it's been great getting connected with some Beta Phis, including Michael Myers, through that vehicle. Really, really nice. Kevin Stombaugh. There's a bunch of guys, and I know there's a bunch of business and public administration and now Eller College graduates and connecteds on this call. Lyle Payne too, I think, is on the call, and it's been great getting to know him through the board at Eller. And then U of A athletics. My Husky friends here in Seattle, it never ceases to amaze me how they're surprised that I'm willing to wear the red, white, and blue at Husky sporting events when Arizona's in town. But I always do, and I tease them like mad when they go to Tucson for a game and they won't wear purple and gold because they're afraid. Love the U of A, love my experience, love cheering for U of A athletics. My wife and I decided to help out a component of U of A athletics at the academic center that helps the student athletes with their mental well-being, knowing that there's a lot of things impacting student athletes. Got Ron Hobbs on the screen there, who was a diver at U of A. He knows this. So we're trying to make a difference by giving people resources to help them with their mental welfare as they navigate a very busy college life between academics, sports, and all the other things they're doing. So proud of my U of A connection, and try to do some things back here in Seattle to help Eller and the U of A. We actually had a big event planned at the Space Needle, where I'm a director, earlier this spring, but we had to cancel it because of COVID-19. And when we get it reactivated, I'm going to get a second shot to try to get an Arizona flag flying from the top of the Space Needle. It's a tough bargaining deal with the Wright family who owns it, because they've got some Huskies in their midst, but I'm working on it. I think that would be pretty cool. Moving on, to something Matt and I touched on when we were connecting and talking about this, starting, founding, and operating a business in today's environment. You guys are all involved out there in your own way with what you do, and it's tough. To be sure. So I look at it like, let's be cognizant and sensitive to the fact of how this is devastating so many people, their livelihood, their families, lost lives. We all know these things, and we need to be sensitive and aware. And from a business standpoint, you say to yourself, not only what do I do to survive with any business I'm working in or connected to, but how do I create an opportunity from this major macro event? And there's a lot of ways to consider opportunity stemming from a crisis. And it makes me think of some great quotes. Warren Buffett, right? Be greedy when others are leery, and be leery when others are greedy. Rahm Emanuel, you never want to waste a serious crisis, and you want to use the opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before. And then one of my favorites, Abraham Lincoln. Firm believer in the people, and if given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts. So I'm sure we're having a lot of debates with friends, colleagues, family about who do I believe? What should we do? A lot to sort through. But we're looking for ways with the businesses that we're connected to create opportunity. And one of them is NHL Seattle. There's a great saying that things in life that connect communities are war, natural disaster, and sport. I remember when we left the Key Arena in 1996 after we beat Utah in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. And it's the coolest thing because it's just the sea of humanity. You guys have all been there at different events that you've been to in your lives where you don't know everybody there, but all of a sudden something happens and you leave and you're one. You're just one community. And to have an impact like that on a community is really cool. So how do we lever our platform? Well, we're trying to get our brand out there. People keep asking, what's the name of the new hockey team going to be? What are the colors? And we're trying to get through some trademark issues right now so we can get it launched and give people some hope, something interesting to debate, to celebrate, to contemplate and think about for the future. So we want to use the platform to continue to be a way to have positive impact on our community. We'll take a percentage of revenues from merch sales, pour them back into causes that have been launched in our community, like all of your communities that are doing things to help people that need help, whether it's food banks or a myriad of different things. So we want to have impact through that platform. So again, it's part of that mission for me and for us, where we can do well in business by doing well by others. And this platform gives us that opportunity. Another example is a company called Fabric that we're involved with. It's a Seattle-based company that has built back-end infrastructure to help medium-sized e-commerce companies reinvent the way the mechanics of how they manage their business work. There's a lot of legacy solutions that haven't been innovated upon. And we decided, you know what? With all of the energy in the internet right now, all of the ordering, all the things people are doing online, we need to launch this company now. So we actually launched it on March 25th as a startup enterprise to help a lot of these medium-sized e-commerce companies power up the next generation of how they're going to serve the masses with what they bring to market. And so we're leveraging this opportunity, this macroeconomic dislocation, this big moment in time for humanity, to try to do something to help people at the end of the chain by giving an infrastructure platform solution that a lot of these companies need. So we're trying to find, from a timing standpoint, the right way to be sensitive to the dynamics around COVID-19, the human side of the story, which is big and important, and we can't be tone deaf to it. But there's also that opportunity in this environment to do some things that can have some real impact and give our businesses a chance to keep moving forward through this unprecedented period of dislocation. So I thought that might offer a couple of examples of how in this environment companies can find opportunity to do things that can help people and ultimately help the continuation of the development of their business. And we're working really hard on that right now. And then for me, you know, I'm on a bank board, and we've produced about $1.5 billion in PPP loans to help small businesses throughout the Northwest region. And it's great to hear a story like I was going to lay off 100 people tomorrow, but I got my loan through you guys, and now I don't have to. Because a lot of the big banks, as I'm sure most of you are aware, are struggling with this whole thing. And so we're a private $8 billion regional bank. So we're not tiny, but we're not as big as Wells and Morgan and B of A, but we have the ability to make a difference. And the ethos in the company is, let's do so. Let's lever this time to help people that need it the most. So that's a huge theme. Hopefully I've made clear to you guys that drives me every day and challenges me to take the risk that we take to engage in businesses that can help people. And you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but it's better to be on the arena floor giving it a shot than being the critic in the stands who doesn't know what it's like to win or lose, but always has an opinion that comes from an uninformed position. So I just want to say, kind of in closing, before we go to some Q&A, seriously humbled by the opportunity to connect with you guys and grateful for it. And want to thank Matt again, and thank all of you guys for taking time out of your busy lives with work and family and all the other things you're doing to connect. And with that, as a proud Sigma Chi from the Beta Phi chapter at the University of Arizona, and in homage to our fellow brother, Chris Avery, who we all know is a huge Bears fan, I thought this quote from Mike Ditka is a fitting way to close. What you do in life by yourself doesn't mean as much as what you accomplish with a group of people. Sigma Chi was one of the greatest things that happened to me. I really appreciate what it has done for me in my lifetime, and I hope I can continue to give something back. And it definitely taught me the value of giving back and the importance of it. And it's not just about treasure, it's about time and talent. And I know a lot of you guys are doing that too. So again, thanks for the opportunity to connect. And Matt, thanks for the invite. And we can go to a conversation and Q&A.
Hey, I'm going to start it off and then I'll unmute everybody. So Chris, do you remember the story when you and I were at the Washington game? We're in your seats there in the second row, the two people in red shirts, and Nate Robinson's dribbling down the court, and he looks up to us and kind of has this thing with his hands and said, "Not today," when they beat us at Washington. You remember that?
You know, unfortunately, I do because U of A getting a win at Washington is not a given. I've had more tough nights walking out of that venue when the Cats come to town than good nights. And yeah, it's a tough place to play. And definitely remember that moment, Matt.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to, so Doug, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Back.
So, did you see it, Chris? So he basically.
Oh, yeah. Let
Back.
me,
When are you going to retire?
Never.
Good.
Honestly, guys, I'll tell you, just being engaged with different things and challenging yourself to try new things and risk, I'm going to keep at it. And I've got a couple of things that we're working on where we may really have in a syndicate type scenario. But for us right now, we're in a syndicate situation with NHL Seattle. It's taking a lot of time because I'm working on our local media strategy for broadcast and radio. And hey, that's awesome for me because that's our background. But I hope I'm on boards until the bylaws say you got to get off when you're 75.
Bob or Bill Wade, why don't you tell him your suggestion for the name?
Hey, Chris.
Hey,
So
Bill.
I got my my name on the list for some hockey tickets.
Nice.
And, yeah.
Thank you.
I was thinking about the Seattle Sockeyes. You know, it's a salmon, but yet in hockey everyone's always hitting each other. So it kind of crosses the the Northwestern and the sport.
Well, that's been a popular name for a lot of people. We've been looking.
Oh, I thought of it first.
What's that?
I thought of it first.
Okay, we'll if we go that route, we'll give you that attribution. A lot of the cool thing is there hasn't been a lot of apathy about the name. There's a lot of energy about it, not surprising, and a lot of cool technology to look at social signals out there about how the fans feel. Both those. Thank you again, Bill, who have put deposits down for tickets, and just people in the community at large. So we're hoping we'll make the announcement in June once we get past another trademark issue. I can tell you one name it won't be that actually showed up in some polls. It is Seattle, after all, and it was the Seattle Socialists. That's not gonna, we had some fun talking about what a mascot could look like if we went that route.
Yeah. Put Bernie's picture on the jersey.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any questions? I see Mike, you got a question there. Oh, I vote for Bill Wade's headphones. Okay.
That's great. By the way, all that interference in that 520 number at the bottom is Ted Jewell. He did attend the Roo Rare, and I've been texting him going, mute your phone, you loser, and he finally figured it out. So of course at the end. It's one of his daughter's birthdays today, so anyway, but he's on there.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Bill or Matt, I see a question from Beck.
Yep.
It's how do you think the virus will affect lending going forward? Do you think banks will be eager to lend money to restaurants and sports arenas that are unable to operate under such conditions? Yeah, I mean, everything's changing. I can tell you right now that with respect to PPP money through Washington Trust Bank, full spectrum of businesses, including restaurants, obviously, so they can keep workforces intact, hoping they can reopen sooner than later. But it is changing, and we're thinking a lot about what life in an arena might look like. Fortunately for us, the lenders we're using for the arena construction, the training facility construction, because of people like Bill Wade and tens of thousands of people who put deposits down and corporate partners that have signed up, that we've got the backing we need to support our debt structure. But for businesses that don't right now, I can tell you that this bank, and I think many for that matter, they want any capital or access to liquidity for a business, restaurant or otherwise, to be used to support them in this time. So if someone's got leverage with the institution, they're in arrears, they're going towards default. Well, there's going to be a workout because this is obviously an unprecedented situation. And then moving forward, who knows? The Space Needle is a good example. You know, we entertain over 1 million people a year there. And, you know, it's hospitality 101. How are we going to make that work going forward with social distancing? We took out a big note to renovate the building a couple of years ago, and we've got to take care of that debt. So we're working through models right now, but I can say I think most banks are going to be very amiable in the near term, and then we're going to have to look at the construct of what's going to be required to keep the type of financing a different type of business needs moving forward.
Yeah, so I guess a follow-up question to that would be, do you think that the economy will start to rebound after maybe a vaccine's found, or do you think this is going to be something that we have to deal with for the next 5 years? I'm a freshman right now at the university, so, you know, coming out of school in 4 years, hopefully it's rebounded by then, but you never know. I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you know, our
U of A is a 5-year program. Sorry.
What's that?
I said U of A is always a 5-year program, not 4 years. So just
Yeah, just for clarification.
You know, I'd start by saying, as I mentioned, when we made the decision to build a vertical in healthcare, we aligned ourselves with some professionals with domain expertise. And I'm far from an expert on the dynamics around what is the reality and probability for an extended run of the pandemic or some sort of peak and valley. I don't know. What I would say, and I think it ties into what Matt wanted me to touch base on, is how do you manage a business in this environment? Well, we had a board call today and said we have to understand what our worst case scenario looks like in the next 12, 18 to 24 months. What's the worst case scenario look like? How do we solve for it as best we can? What tools are at our disposal? So will the pandemic come back? Will it still be there in a couple of years? I don't know. What I do know is I think people are seeing this as maybe a new normal. And so how do we solve for it where the world can continue to live, act, and function in a reasonable way? Because obviously shelter in place in perpetuity won't allow the world to function as it needs to be sustainable. So I think we got great advances in medicine, and a lot of people are probably relying on a vaccine before they're going to make a big commitment to that next chapter. And that looks like probably maybe a Q1 event, which would be unprecedented in terms of total duration, stem to stern, for something to get through the FDA. But I think you got to look at your worst case scenario, either as a student, as a business owner, and think, can I solve for that? And if I have some comfort in how I can at least manage to that, then I can get somewhere. And so we're looking at all those types of scenarios right now.
By the way, guys, I thought I'd just share with you real quickly as it relates to Sigma Chi and Greek life on how all this is impacting. So U of A is right now talking about no in-person recruitment in the fall. Basically use the summer, do virtual recruitment right now, and not in person. If anybody has watched the videos, you've seen that they're planning to convert 1 or 2 dorms into, let's just say, places to send the sick if something happens. And fraternities and sororities are having some really interesting dialogues right now on, do I run my meal plan or not? Do I want people around the dining room table? Sororities, you know, they have sleeping porches, some of them, 50 girls on one sleeping porch. So you start thinking about them having to look at their options. So Sigma Chi and other chapters, we're all looking at the worst case scenario, as you said, Chris, and trying to see how do we get through this. My guess is we'll get through it, but the undergraduates will probably be the ones that this has the biggest impact on, because that big party in the courtyard, that's probably a big questionable activity going on during this next year.
Yeah. Well, Matt, and I know Mike Myers, I think, is on the call, and maybe a couple of others that might have been on the Eller call the other day with Dean Goes, but it's staggering looking at the analytics around the impact on the U of A, and certainly the college as a byproduct of this, with a lot of international full paying tuition, students probably not coming back. So a lot of moving parts. So I wanted to add here, Matt, that there's Matt Wolf asked if we or partners have experience investing in entertainment in TV, film, digital. The answer is yes, we do. We actually have a separate fund structure with a producer from Los Angeles. We don't run towards film. We usually run from it. I think film makes VC look like a conservative business model. But we do some things in content. We did a cable network with some partners in New York called College Sports TV, which we sold to CBS a number of years ago. It's now, you guys see, you can see Arizona sports on it every now and then. It's CBS College Sports Network. So answer is we do, but we're probably doing less content today than we did early on after the sale of the company, just because it's so prolific and production's expensive. And even with all the new forms of distribution in the digital age, it's tricky. I will say, talking to our partner from Paramount, there's a lot of concern about theatrical release in film moving forward and the probability that the movie theater business is really going to struggle. And does it come back? Or do we just go direct to digital distribution right away with the release of a major film? TBD. So I don't know if you guys have read Boys in the Boat about the 1936 crew from the University of Washington that beat Hitler's crew in the Berlin Olympics, but it's a great book. And we're trying with some partners to get that made into a film because we think it's kind of that Chariots of Fire, Seabiscuit, kind of transcendent, multi-generational category. So stay tuned on that.
Guys, one other thing I was just going to share. We're going to try to do these about once a month. You know, the positive that's come out of this, we found this is such an easy way to get a bunch of people together for a half hour to an hour and talk about a subject. So if any of you have ideas of alums that you'd like to hear from, send me a message through, and we'll work on getting that. We're going to try to do that once a month.
Hey, Matt, there's a suggestion there in the chat box that we should try to lever the old Fiji house and SE house to be a place to get the people that are in the most need.
I saw that. I'll share. Fiji's one of my clients. I'll share that with them. SAE is not on campus right now. So.
And then who's closest to the house today to figure out if they've still got Camel Jerk on the calendar for this coming year?
No. I'm not even a Sigma Chi, and I can tell you no.
All right. Well,
I haven't thought about the den of iniquity in a while, so that was a good throwback.
Yes.
Talk about viruses.
Yeah, that's one of those.
We're still probably all recovering from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to take a black light down there.
Any other questions, or if not, we'll wrap it up.
McKay, you've been nominated to be the coxswain in Boys in the Boat. You ready?
Yeah, I'll do it.
All right.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, Matt, if you need any bulldozers to bulldoze SAE or Fiji, I can get you a couple of those too. We need more parking at campus. So that's another good suggestion. And my immune system from the den of iniquity is awesome. So I think I've had everything. So, hey, good to see you guys. Seriously, in hope.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, before we go, I just wanted to ask, do you know if there's a date on the calendar for homecoming right now?
There is. I think it's homecoming weekend. And
I'm hearing that graduation walkthrough would actually happen then instead of this spring, obviously.
That's what their plan is, assuming everything goes in the right direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put on my calendar homecoming 2020, and I'm hoping that we'll be in a better place where it would give me a chance to say hello to a lot of you guys. It's great to see you.
I just heard from my daughter and her boyfriend. Homecoming is the week of Halloween.
Right on.
Great to see everyone.
Hey, good.
Only imagine what that homecoming is going to be like if everybody's in person.
Well, you guys, in hope, great to see everyone. And Matt, thanks for setting this up.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
man.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks,
All right,
Matt.
take care, everybody.
See you guys.
Great to see you, buddy.
Hope
Thanks.
you all
God bless, guys.